Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Click Wars podcast. Jamie, what's happening, brother?
Yeah, it was a really good one. I think it's the longest one we've done as well. Spoke to James, who leads one of the biggest agencies, and it was interesting to get, because I think that he's also in, or has been and dabbled in, I know he has a travel site, they're in the affiliate site game, and so it was interesting to get someone who sees and has been in the trenches on both sides. And there's a lot of people that we are in our audiences that are both on the agency side and in the content site game, and the content sites have been hit more. So it was interesting to get someone's perspective and try and voice both sides and why some people might be frustrated, and get really deep into what EEAT is, what brand building is, how digital PR feeds into that, and misconceptions, how EEAT works on the author level, the content level, and most importantly, on the author and brand levels, and how people are focused perhaps too much on the content level. I'm not sure. I don't agree with that being a thing. I think that content as a meritocracy is a great thing, but it's important to get the truth so you can get and do the things on your sites that improves them. And it's not just about content, which we sort of got. It's quite a deep detail on, and how people can fix themselves up on the author and brand levels as well, in order to get themselves out of what has been a large hit for a lot of affiliate content sites. So it was an interesting one.
It was, man, like the connecting the dots between SEO, content, digital PR, how to build a strong EAT, like all of that coming together to culminate in essentially what is like building a brand, was super, super interesting. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. But let's get into it on the Quick Wars podcast.
Welcome to another episode of Click Wars. Today we've got one of the better known people in the UK for everything EEAT, digital PR, and everything related. We met briefly at Affiliate Gathering back last May, and now we've got him on to grill him on everything that you can do for your content sites, client sites, everything else around, making sure that you win in what is probably the most controversial time recently in SEO, with a lot of sites getting taken down, a lot of sites that were thought they were good, and like a lot of people saying like EAT is just a link thing. Other people swear it's the opposite. We're going to get all the answers now because everyone wants them. So thank you for coming on, James. We've got Sammy here as well, and yeah, thanks for giving us your time and answering some questions.
Very welcome. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to chatting and yeah, hopefully answering some of the questions you guys have.
Nice, man. Yeah, thank you. We like doing this little thing on this podcast, which is basically, instead of you giving like a 5-minute rant about like who you are, where you came from and your dog's name and all of that jazz, 20 seconds, who is Mr. James Brockbank, basically?
20 seconds, who am I? I'm managing director and founder of an agency called Digitaloft. We're focused on SEO and digital PR. I've been doing SEO for 15 years this year. And I'm very much focused on doing what drives results. You know, I'm not into black hat, white hat. It's all about what drives the results, and I think that shifts. And yeah, where I am today, I'm all about doing what you need to do to drive organic growth.
Nice. So kicking it off, give us a quick, succinct definition of EEAT, and then we've got a few more questions how that relates to a lot of the affiliate sites.
Succinct definition of EEAT. I mean, I think where EEAT is, it's about doing what your audience wants. It's about giving your audience a reason to trust you. And I think, where EEAT has been so commonly confused over the past couple of years is that everybody sort of tries to see it as a ranking factor. Everybody looks at it as a ranking factor like we're used to as SEOs, rather than really doing what searchers expect. And I think when you get into, it's a mindset shift. As far as I'm concerned, EEAT is all about a mindset. It's all about how can you build and demonstrate your reputation, which of course alongside that comes trust. When you think about it that way, you start to approach it very, very differently, as opposed to thinking, okay, is this going to increase the ranking of these keywords by 2 positions? It's not that. It's about helping, at the end of the day, real people to trust you. And, I think it comes back to the fact that people buy from people consume content from people. And in a world of AI-generated content, in a world of fake news and misinformation, everyday consumers are putting the content they consume under more scrutiny than ever. And I think EEAT is about having a mindset to come out the right side of that. And, it sort of comes in an extension of, my approach to SEO in general, which is being able to answer that question on why do you deserve to rank? Why should your page, your site deserve to rank in that number one spot? And it's what trips people up. I think looking, nobody, Google owes you nothing. And as soon as you accept that, that's when you can start to really break down and go, right, okay, if Google owes me nothing, how do I earn that right to rank? And EEAT it's a big part of that. But also, I think something that has been so commonly misunderstood over the past few years, I'm guilty of it. What are we? We're probably coming up to 10, 11 years since the concept of EEAT first came into Google's quality rater guidelines. And if you'd have asked me 10 years ago what I thought on EEAT, I would have said, no way in hell can Google understand who an author is. No way can Google really determine whether there's experts behind this content. Fast forward to today, and there's so much evidence that they can. And I think even that aside, Google have come out many times and said EEAT is not a ranking factor. I don't think it ever has been. I don't think we should have ever thought about it as a ranking factor. But sort of Google's definition of it is that it aligns with things that their ranking systems reward. And hopefully, today we can break down and sort of tear apart what some of those things are that could align. Was EEAT a big, big part of various algorithm updates last year? Without a doubt. Helpful content update. There is so much evidence that it was based on EEAT. Now, not necessarily for the reasons people think. That's hopefully something we can dig into today.
Nice. And so you mentioned that you're like, it's a good way of putting about it. I don't care if it's black hair, white hair. I care about getting honest results and driving results for those clients, right? But then a lot of people will say on the other side that EAT is hard to quantify. It's like the signals versus like systems. It's difficult to it's a good way of Google for incentivizing people to do the right things without necessarily being. Someone will say that that's the other side. How do you combine the I'm about results and the difficulties measuring EAT and like, did this lead to the results or anything else?
And I think EEAT, don't get me wrong, is it difficult to measure the impact of work around EEAT? Yes, but it shouldn't just be about SEO. And, we can move into this argument of, should you be doing anything just for Google? No, you shouldn't. Is EEAT about doing the things that help your users, the searchers, to trust you more? Absolutely. And I think when you take Google out of the question for a minute, Google's your traffic acquisition channel. When you think about EEAT as helping, building and demonstrating your reputation, helping people to trust you, that in itself typically has a positive impact. If you're an e-commerce retailer, that in turn is going to be all about increasing that conversion rate, helping people to, to trust that you are the right store to buy from. If you are running a content site, it's going to get a better time on page. You are going to get more content consumed, which in turn, of course, is typically more ad revenue clicking through to affiliate links. Take away SEO for a minute and it becomes far, far clearer why we should be doing this. And I think, the way I've certainly come to think of it, and I have certainly not always held this view. This view has probably come in the last 18 months to 2 years. When you sort of accept that you're not doing it for Google and you're doing it for your users, you start to think, well, actually, it's not really about quantifying it from an SEO perspective. It's about building a brand, building a business that people trust. And, don't get me wrong, I've said many a time over the past 6-7 months that the helpful content update could have been called the real business update. Hands down, I have said this time and time again. Obviously, at the agency, we are typically working with certainly 70-80% of the clients we work with they're real businesses. I use that term lightly, but they are businesses with offline experience. If Google was to take away tomorrow, they would still be a business in existence. Why is that? It's because they've built a business that isn't solely based on search traffic. And I think, Google get a lot of stick for the things they say around, don't do this for Google, do this for your users. But there's a certain element of truth in this, and we have to sort of think about this sort of certainly on the lines of why were real businesses, I vividly remember there being a piece, sort of a thread on Twitter, on X, a couple of days after the helpful content update rolled out. And it was people questioning, I think it was an air conditioning installer or an air conditioning maintenance company in the States, and their content was pretty crap. It was not great. It was full of spelling mistakes. And I think the questions being thrown around, I think it was Marie Haynes who sort of first shared this and responded to it. And it was, the questions were, why is this content ranking? And it was actually really simple. Those guys are there day in, day out, going and fixing air conditioning. And this was a roundup of, I think it was a roundup on the best air conditioning systems, something like that. And actually, they are probably, without even trying to, demonstrating EEAT. The fact that they are day in, day out practicing this, they are demonstrating EEAT. And I think when you get into that mindset of splitting EEAT into, you've got to build your reputation, then you've got to demonstrate it. I think for too long, SEOs, the straight up sort of content site people, have jumped straight to demonstrating EEAT rather than building it. A lot of your offline businesses have spent years and years building that reputation. And now it's come to the point where Google is going, maybe you don't need to demonstrate it as much as some people are saying because you've already built that. And I think, that is certainly why I call it, or say it could have been called the Real Business Update, because there is an absolute trend that businesses that have an offline presence, I've still to see many examples of sites being hit, certainly in the helpful content update and the reviews update. And I think it comes back to that, it's almost the stuff that can't be quantified. But I think, when as SEOs, we have a duty to sort of then translate that into actionable things that we can do. And I think the big gap is you've got to demonstrate, you've got to build it before you demonstrate it.
So talking about that then, because that's something that everyone's going to want to know the answer to listening to that.
Yeah.
They're going to go, okay, James, yeah, great. Like that sounds awesome. But I'm a content site and I make blog content. And now I've got, I've put my modern slavery statement up. I've done all of these types of things. You mentioned off page and building a business off page. Obviously that will feature into PR and links, of course, but what are some of the other things that people can do? Is it e-commerce? That's been floated before, put a few digital products up and people will say that, but like what actually shows you're a real business?
Yeah. And I think, don't get me wrong, there is definitely that side of it. There's definitely the side of, are you just an informational site? Now, don't get me wrong. There are many, many informational only sites that did well. They are ones with, they are your health lines, your Very Well Fits, the ones with years and years of sort of top tier experience, expertise, and and that then it feeds into they are public, they are publishers, many of which once upon a time had physical print magazines. Now, the whole e-commerce thing, the whole e-commerce versus informational, it's content sites, I believe, can still perform. But I think, the honest, and I think, what people don't like hearing is that most people who started a content site 2 years ago, they weren't experts in what, this is the cold hard truth, is that a lot of people, they're not experts. They don't have a background. Now, it doesn't mean you can't become it, but, we're all guilty of this. Don't get me wrong. When something's working, we all pile in, and SEOs have done this for years, whether it was guest posting, bought links in 2012, 2013, give SEOs a good thing and they will ruin it. Guaranteed. But I think, coming to that online, offline, I don't believe it's about that, but I believe the selling products it's definitely a signal that we are more than just a site that's reliant on Google. And it's really hard to quantify that. It's really, really hard to say that, go and, you can't just go and add a number of e-commerce products and expect to recover from the helpful content update. It's not that easy.
Yeah.
But I think it comes into this.
That would be fucking great,
and
wouldn't it?
I think, we've all got to be careful because, you answer these questions and before you know it, people are citing, James Brockbank said that if we, go and add an e-commerce store, it's not going to happen. But I think it's thinking about how are you serving your audience? And I think the simple nature, if you are selling, whether it's digital products, physical products, you are veering into a business that isn't just about earning ad traffic or affiliate traffic. You have, in doing so, you're sourcing products, you're learning about those products. And I think, simply the whole process of that is to some extent building that expertise, that experience. Now, what I will also say is, just because you may not be an expert in something now, it doesn't mean you can't become it. Yeah. But the unfortunate reality is that most people don't want to do that. And I think, why have Google, if we start to talk about why Google potentially felt the need to roll out the helpful content update, which, don't get me wrong, I think the SERPs are worse quality than they ever have been. That is, seeing Reddit, seeing Quora, seeing, a lot of sites that quite honestly aren't a great experience. There's a lot of work to do. But I think, why did Google feel the need to go hard on this? And again, I think we've only got ourselves to blame. People taking to Twitter going, look what I've done. We all saw the great SEO heist a couple of months ago. Don't do it. Google are watching like hawks. And I think it comes back to, I saw someone the other day saying on Twitter, they were saying, where's the best place for me to go and sell links? Don't be so public. Google, if I can find out what your site is and that you're selling links, Google sure as hell can. And I think, it's, yes, the quality of the SERPs has gone down, but I think alongside that, so has the quality of the content in, not necessarily the quality of content, but the volume of content that is just, what I've always called copycat content. Should you be able to rank by effectively ripping off what ranks at the top of the SERPs and doing it in volume? No, you're adding nothing new. And one of the big things that I've certainly seen post helpful content update, which isn't related to EEAT at all, is there's been a massive, massive intent shift on some SERPs.
Yeah.
And, I do, both personally with a number of sites and through the agency, we do a lot of work with travel brands. 12 months ago, you would see a massive intent difference between the query of resorts in the Caribbean, which would be your TUI, your booking.com, your hotels.com, the sites where you can book, and the query of best resorts in the Caribbean, which would have been informational content and roundups. I was looking at this last week for a piece of work we're doing. Those SERPs are now pretty much the same. The SERPs for best resorts in, best hotels in, they are no longer informational content. So I think on that, we've also got to look at, okay, some of these sites weren't necessarily hit in the way people believe they were hit. Google changed what they're ranking. And I think that's something we have to be aware of. Intent shift on the SERPs happens all the time in core algorithm updates. And when we look at this, it's really saying, I ain't going to rank for that as I was. If you were ranking informational content on best resorts in the Caribbean 12 months ago, you would have ranked, 70 to 80% of the first page of the SERPs was that style of content. It is now the pages where you can book. Now,
is that
the flip side of that?
Is that just an intent shift, or in some cases, what I'm seeing on some of the affiliate SERPs that I see, where I see the same intent shift, but not only for the best versus like the seed term, but also the plural versus the singular, where people are looking for multiple options. It's just showing one e-commerce page. And I'm not sure if it's just a SERP intent shift for what they're showing, or if it's just a demotion of all of that type of content from a classifier that other forms of sites are not getting. They're not being classified.
It's a difficult one because I think, there are still plenty of examples on some SERPs of best type content ranking in top spots. I was going through this for a travel brand the other day, and actually, I think it depends on what that intent is. When you are, say, at a broader level, it is still, we are still seeing that best content rank. So I don't know. Best resorts for families on the west coast of the USA is still that informational content. Best resorts in Miami, best resorts in Barbados, take it even more granular. That is where we're seeing the Booking.coms, the TripAdvisors. But I think there's most likely a combination of the two things happening there. And I think, there is the flip of it. What we see, what I've seen over the past 6, 7, 8 months on e-commerce brands is that they're staying pretty static in terms of their SERPs aren't necessarily shifting. We're not seeing a big shake-up in a lot of the sort of traditional commercial intent. But I think when we, and whether it's intent shift, whether it's, Google demoting, the outcome is the same. And I think, to a certain extent, we're just saying, we're saying the same thing in different ways, that you will not rank that type of content for those terms anymore. So I think, coming back to your question before, Sammy, is a way to remedy that. And this is something we're in the process of testing and looking at. Could you go and, don't forget TripAdvisor, have got, they've got the benefit of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of reviews of ratings.
UGC, yeah.
But in many cases, they are still that intermediary for the bookings. They're not, still not your straight up booking.com where you're transacting through that site. So actually, could you replicate that? Can you almost become your, just to, flip it a little bit, car insurance, Compare the Market are not an insurance provider. Go Compare are not an insurance provider. Confused.com are not an insurance provider. They have not been hit. Those sites, and I can speak confidently because I work with a couple of them from one of the same groups. They have not been hit. They have seen growth. They are, for all intents and purposes, they are a middleman. They are affiliates. So actually, can you start to replicate that and go, right, okay, rather than just going best of as informational content, can you start to almost build in those, they're almost product category, they're almost your e-commerce category pages, aren't they? But they're just not transacting through the site. So you've got your, your filterable, your sortable results. Can you hit the intent that way whilst doing the same thing? I don't know, but it's certainly something we're testing. And I think, very, very closely leads back to what you were saying about e-commerce. You can give that same experience by looking at what the winners are doing, TripAdvisors, that sort of thing. What will happen? I don't know. But I think, it's certainly something that we're testing, we're looking at to say, right, okay, this is based on the insights that your Compare the Markets, your Confused.coms, your UseWhich, they did not get hit in these algorithm updates. And really, can you start to replicate that business model? Is that business model going to be closer to what can succeed rather than a straight up content site in 2024 and beyond? I think so. I think, give it a few months, and I think as an industry, we will have a much better idea. But I think, do you need your own products? I don't believe you do. It's just sort of, we're fighting an ongoing battle, aren't we? We're always having to respond to the SERPs, and Google has more data than any of us ever will. There is a reason it's being done. But I think, in SEO, if you want to know why somebody else has won and you've lost ground. Just look at the SERPs. I think we're all guilty of spending far too long in tools and not enough time actually using the SERPs. And, what I said before, asking ourselves, do I really deserve to rank above this as a user, as a searcher? And I think, when we come back to intent shift, Jamie, you sort of mentioned that, is it that these sites have been demoted? And I think the honest answer is it's not really what anyone was ever looking for. Can you compete with TripAdvisor's ratings? If you want to find the best hotel in New York, can you really compete against TripAdvisor? Do you really deserve to outrank that? Whether you've put 10 days of work into writing it, taking photos, can you really replicate that? I would say the question is, the answer to that question is no.
Yeah,
So
it's
I agree
finding
with that
different intents there.
I agree with that for some types of query.
Yeah.
But we also feel, well, I'm interested, the next question will be around like SERP quality, and that you feel, I think a lot of people feel like, though, like this has been promoting of, I guess, authentic, real businesses, whether they're manufacturers of products or like just big brands in the space that, like you said, used to be print publishers and stuff like that. So they've done that. They've gone and made sure that the location the content comes from now is of more importance than it was a year ago. But I think the majority of people will say SERP quality has decreased. How do we find a middle?
There is no question. There are no questions that it's the poor. I think it's the poorest it's been in probably 10 years since sort of after Penguin rolled out.
So how do we figure out how to both promote the best content while also, that you mentioned in some cases the intent was never that what people were getting traffic for, and I agree with that in travel, because I think travel is its own category. For some SERPs that I'm seeing though, it's like for products related searches, I'm seeing like broad intent shown for like long tail specific intent that I know is different for certain things. And I've never seen, like even when it was majority promoting direct hitting of intent, and it might have been like a more set of like content sites or anything else ranking, the ones that had done the most real reviews and had the most like segmentation, like actionable, this is for you if X and Y, based on like real like qualitative and quantitative testing, they typically ranked higher. I'm seeing so much less of a correlation with those real reviews and like a higher quality insights from experts ranking now than before. And that's what frustrates me, in that, like, I know that in some cases 100% agree, some people weren't looking for some information in the first place, or the quality was not as good as people thought they were. However, I am still seeing a lot of instances where really good, like I did some audits yesterday just I was testing something, and there's some excellent content that's been booted whilst these like really much worse quality stuff is going skyrocketing.
It's a really interesting when you say that, and I think that, to answer a couple of things there that I've sort of been thinking on whilst you were talking, Jamie, is that, every SERP is different, and I think, what we have to be really careful of is avoiding generalizing too much. What we see in travel is very different to product. What we see in product is very different to B2B. And I think, the answers are on the SERPs themselves, so as coming back to it, spend time as a user looking at the SERPs. Now, what I think we're getting to here, this question on why have we seen sites with great, with genuinely great content, and I have seen many. One of my own sites that actually has never had any AI content anywhere near it, almost got treated as if it did. What are we seeing there? And I think this loops back to EEAT, and in a lot of the audits, a lot of the work, a lot of the conversations I've had with people whose sites were hit. We have to understand that EEAT can and should be broken down into three distinct parts. We've got content level, we've got author level, and we've got brand level. I think it's page 27, if I'm right, on the Google Quality Rater Guidelines, really clearly breaks this out, that it is about the content on your site, who has created that content and the brand that is publishing that content. In my experience, where there has been great quality content, and don't get me wrong, there is a lot of content that is much better than what ranks that's out there. In my experience of analyzing these types of drops, they are lacking EEAT signals at either the author level or the brand level.
Yeah.
And I think that is certainly where I'm at with this, in that, yes, there is an awful lot of content that is very, very good content that's not ranking. You then go and have a look at, okay, well, from a brand perspective, from an author level perspective, there are usually massive, massive opportunities. You know, it's either that question of, well, who the hell's created this content, or who the hell's publishing this content? And I think this also comes into that $1 million question of, why is Google rewarding big brands who maybe don't have the same quality content? It's because people trust them, you know, and are they, you know, look at Forbes with Forbes Advisor, you know, should they be ranking the way they are for some of these queries? You know, there's been examples of them, you know, it might not be the Forbes Advisor, but one of their sort of affiliate divisions ranking for best supplements, that sort of thing. Forbes is a business publication, but they have the trust at brand level. They have brought in people whose personal, or, you know, I don't like using the term authorship because people sort of try and take it back to when we had Google Plus authorship. But I think the biggest thing anybody can do right now is to demonstrate that author level EEAT and the brand level, which of course leads very, very nicely into one of the things I know we're going to be discussing, which is digital PR, you know, building that awareness, building that buzz. And I think, you know, the simple answer, Jamie, to your question there is that those sites with great content that I have seen suffer drops or are not ranking as well as they should be, there are almost always opportunities either at the brand level or the author level to really demonstrate that trust.
Yeah,
let's go on to that, man, because I want to talk about this, and I want to make sure we cover this in good detail, because it's obviously you're what you're most known for. But the agency itself, Digital Lofts, talks about connecting the dots. And I feel like that's very important to state, that like digital PR doesn't just completely solve your issues. It all needs to be succinct and work together. So can we talk about how we work the content, the SEO and the digital PR together, and then some of the examples that we can talk about?
Absolutely. Of course we can. So, you know, I mean, I think, you know, if we look at the role of digital PR in demonstrating EEAT in SEO in general right now, look, it's about demonstrating that you are a trusted expert and a voice of authority within that space. Now, if you are being cited, and I'm going to say cited for now before linked to, if you're being cited in the press by authority publications now, that definition of authority means different things to different niches. You know, don't get me wrong, you know, there are plenty of, you know, when you dig into the Google patents, which I spent quite a lot of time just before Christmas going back and revisiting some of the Google patents around potentially the ways that Google understands authors. There are patents out there that use this concept of author rank. Now, it is very, very clear, Google are very clear, and, you know, we don't know for certain that Google is actively using these patents, but the fact that many of them are sort of evolutions on each other suggests they probably are to a certain extent. Now, effectively, there is some sort of a, you know, I don't want to call it a score, but it's that sort of, you know, that Google knows how they could, is what I'll say. You know, we don't know they are doing, but effectively that author rank score could be different for different topics.
Yeah.
Now, this comes into sort of topic level page rank going back a long time, you know, and I think what we have to look at here is that you need to be seen as an expert in your space. Now, this is relevant both at a brand level and an author level. And I think then it's, the whole concept of connecting the dots, can you go and create an author bio page and say, I'm an expert in X, Y, or Z. I've been doing it 15 years. That's not going to have the impact. But if you create this author bio page that you are then saying, here's the content I've published on my site. Here are links to content I've published on other sites, on industry publications. Here is where I've been featured in the press. If you're using schema markup to showcase, your author profiles on these other sites, you are connecting the dots. There's this whole concept of, if you look at how, that the proven process for landing a personal knowledge panel right now, it's about corroborating what you say versus what other people say. You take that entity home, which could be your author page, it could be your personal homepage. And effectively, Google is looking to say, right, okay, this person says they are an expert in this, this, or this. Right, where's the evidence? Now, where digital PR comes in is if you are being talked about and referenced as an expert or a voice of authority in the same topics you're writing about, that is a pretty good signal. If we come back to the sort of fundamental workings of a search engine, there are not too many ways that Google can validate who you are and your expertise. Links, press coverage are still a huge part of that. And we know that over the past few years, Google has become a lot better at understanding entities, which is where we get the whole concept of semantic SEO, of entity-based SEO. And it's about, the connecting the dots here. Look, if you are publishing content on, I don't know, Sammy, give us a topic of, a finance topic you've been writing about. Let's use an example.
All right, like this. I was going to ask you for a live example in a minute, so let's get it.
I would much prefer to. Let's give a live example.
I know you work with money.co.uk, so I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this. But
yeah, give us a live example.
Okay, I'm talking about growing digital products, sales through digital products. Do you want it more finance money based or?
It's up to you. It's up to you. I mean, we can go on digital products So what you're saying there is that we're talking about increasing visibility of content around side hustles. Cool. So if we take those topics there, effectively that's side hustles, that is entrepreneurship, and it is becoming a digital creator. Now, what you're effectively looking at there is, right, okay, you're writing this content on your site. How do you then showcase that you're actually a trusted voice in that? You could go and write anything on your site. You could go and write anything about how to do this, what to do, what steps to take. You then start pitching out to the press. You start building relationships. You start proactively pitching out tips around, tips, advice, becoming a digital creator. You do maybe a data study around, there's been a surge in digital creators of X over the past 2 years. The average digital creator is earning X, Y, or Z. You start to bring some data into it. Very, very quickly, you're creating content that journalists want, and what I will say is there has never been a bigger opportunity for brands and individuals to leverage digital PR. There are more and more journalists being made redundant. The publications are cutting their number of in-house writers massively, and they have done over the past 2 years. So what does that mean? They still want to publish that same level of content. They still want to publish content, but they are also under scrutiny. These publications are also under scrutiny to make sure their content's ranking, their content's performing. How do they demonstrate EEAT through their content? It's to include experts. Now, certainly, the topic of being a digital creator, it's not necessarily about the expertise part of it. Again, coming back to every SERP, every niche is different. It is more the experience. So what would work in digital PR? Well, case studies, how you've done it. I think there's, there was a great feature of Ryan Durrani, who's now at Rise at 7 in Business Insider last year, which was, here's how I earned 500 grand or, 2 million or whatever it was
as a freelancer.
Yeah. So you go in, real life stories, and you're then connecting the dots. Coming back to this concept of connecting the dots, if you've got these big publications writing about you, referencing you by name, linking to you, you have to make it really difficult for Google to ignore that you are an expert in that space. And, expertise, experience. Why did Google bring in the extra E to EEAT the other year? Because not everything needs formal expertise. You can go and do a course on becoming a digital creator, and it means absolutely sod all. It doesn't mean you're going to go and make 5 grand, 10 grand, 100 grand, million. But actually, if you can position yourself as a voice of authority by offering tips, advice, case studies, data studies that showcase, okay, I'm really involved in this, I know this space, you are connecting those dots. And that's the role of digital PR. The role of digital PR is really, it's building that reputation. And then the demonstration of that is where, on your author profiles, your About Us pages, you complete this loop. You make it really, really easy for Google to see, okay, this person has been mentioned in this article. They've linked to their site, right? Okay, well, they're actually confirming back that they were featured here. And I think, a lot of, straight up SEOs will go, oh, don't ever link back to someone who links to you. Forget that concept. That is not a link exchange. That age old thing of, well, I'm not going to link to you if you link to me, because that's seen as a link exchange. No, we're talking real publications here. We're talking, you have your in the press page, and I think, the whole thing of EEAT, it's not one thing. You can't just go do this to demonstrate EEAT. But if you're being talked about in the press, either as an individual or a brand, why wouldn't you shout about it? Why wouldn't you go, here are the links to where I've been featured? For the simple reason that someone who's coming onto your site as a user, it will make them trust you. And I think, this is where this whole thing of connecting the dots comes from. You then, as I said, drop this into schema markup. You're referencing the same as, and I think, one of those questions is, could I not just go and create an author profile for a known expert in that space and fake it? They will never, ever be able to complete that loop. If you go and, I don't know, who's one of the, Stephen Bartlett, Social Chain, previously of Social Chain, Diary of a CEO, is, without a doubt one of the most, successful digital creators at the moment. The reason you can't go and create an author profile on your site for Stephen Bartlett, go and use his bio info, his references in the press, is because that loop will never, ever be completed. He is never, ever going to, he's never going to go on his social profiles and link back. You're not going to see references in the press of him linking back to your site because it's fake. And that is why you can't fake this, because, it's about corroborating what, and this is all in Google's quality rating guidelines. It's about corroborating what you say with what other people say. And you have to complete that loop. When you're able to do that, you make it really, really damn difficult for Google to ignore who you are and the fact that actually you are who you say you are, and that actually you're being referenced, in the right topics, so topicality is really important as well. If you're wanting to drive growth around being a digital creator, then actually, you need to be talked about in those topics with, there needs to be an entity match. And I think, that's one of the reasons why, I've experimented with all sorts over the past few years, and I haven't, and the sites of my own that were probably the worst affected by the helpful content update were using me as an author. Now, if you go to Google, pop my name in, Google knows through and through I am an SEO. So coming back to this whole thing of sort of topic level author rank, why would Google rank my content on travel or finance? There is no footprint out there to say that's who I am and what I do. But actually, I can go and publish a piece of content on the agency site around SEO, around digital PR, around EEAT, and I can rank that on the first page of Google really easily. When you break it down like that, you almost don't need to quantify the impact of it. It is almost, you're earning the right to rank. And again, step away from Google for a minute and, ask yourself, if Google didn't exist, why would I be doing this digital PR activity, writing for other publications? It would be to build your brand or your personal brand. And I think they are the things that, Google says they are signals. Google says that their systems reward things that align with EEAT and the quality rater guidelines. My take is that they are those sort of things. They are the things that you've got to make it damn difficult for Google to ignore who you are. And I think, again, Jamie, coming back to your question about, great content that doesn't rank, 9 times out of 10, there are sites doing a better job of that. Now, can you be an expert and demonstrate that in something really niche? Of course you can. And actually that's the way to sort of outperform some of these brands that are very wide. I think, 2 years ago, if we'd have had this conversation, I think we'd have all been saying, go broader, go and publish content on a tangential topic. Now it is all in niching down. And I think, if you want to build in multiple sub niches within a niche, you've got to build that expertise at each of those sub levels.
So, there are a lot of I'm on your side on the author stuff. A lot of what we've been doing internally is around making sure that we I think we didn't do a good enough job of it. I think we did have expert authors and we didn't do a good enough job of promoting that. We spent a lot of time going into not just like improving the standalone pages and where they've been featured, but we can't get Wikipedia pages, but we've got Wikidata, we've got all the other references for where like Crunchbase profiles for the Mark Rep and all the other
100%.
related stuff like that. But the thing is, though, on the other side, we've seen no change from that happening. And then, like, for every example we've seen where that is, and beefing up the schema and everything has, you can see effects of that if you look at the performance of big brands. You also see a lot of big brands that are using freelance writers with no expertise in their niche that are ranking. Some cases because they're using editors with like perceived like expertise, and then they have the editor schema and stuff like that. But like even then, like we've added excellent editors who really did edit it with the schema and everything else to match it the same way and not seen those results. And so there is counterpoints to a lot of this, and I want it to be true because I want to go and do all the 100%. Stuff. But below that, and I don't want to just go and talk about DR, but below like that DR 80 level, it seems like we can talk about this stuff as good hypotheticals, but whether it's actually expressed in the SERPs is another factor completely.
Yeah. And I think this is where we sort of come full circle in that, are the SERPs rewarding what should be rewarded right now? I don't believe. I think we're still seeing SERPs that they weighted towards big brands. And I think if we look at Reddit, if we look at Core, if we look at those sort of sites that started ranking, Google have admitted that they know there are issues with the SERPs, and I think if we break it down to the problem Google had was that there was a surge over 18 months of relatively low quality sites that probably weren't better than what was already out there. What's the simplest way for Google to short-term fix the SERPs, in their opinion? It's to reward big brands sort of disproportionately. Now, I think as with everything, and I think whilst Google have said they're not going to directly reverse the helpful content update, unfortunately, what I think, I said before, I'm going to share some insights as to why I believe, the evidence behind that, why I believe the helpful content update is closer aligned to things like EEAT than we may think. Is in the antitrust trial before Christmas, one of the things that was revealed as part of that, the same time that Nav Boost was talked about for probably the first time publicly, is that Google's quality ratings are used to train multiple algorithms. And my take on this here is that going back in probably the 12 months prior to the most impactful helpful content update last September, Google had been training their algorithms on content that had been rated as having a high or a very high level of EEAT. Now, I think a lot of the sites got hit, so what they're doing, and this matches perfectly with Google saying, do the things that align with that. And also what's come out of the antitrust trial, that they are training these systems on data from quality raters. So quality raters are not directly influencing the live SERPs, but their ratings are being used to train the models. So what that ultimately means is I believe we're going to have to wait for some sort of a refresh. And actually, whether we've done these things to our sites, whether we haven't, we are in a period where that algorithm, the helpful content system, is, it has been trained on data that has almost suppressed these sites. We know that it is sort of proportional to the percentage of unhelpful content, and that the sites with a higher percentage of deemed unhelpful content will get more of a dampening factor put on them. My gut feeling here, Jamie, is that why people aren't seeing the impact of these things is that we haven't yet had that full refresh of content that has been rated differently and therefore trained the systems on that. And I have this feeling that, Google haven't gone out there and gone, we're going to reward big brands. What has happened is that quality raters have rated content from big brands, familiar publishers, higher than that of unknown sites. And that we are in this period, and it's the number one reason why I believe we have not seen that full large-scale refresh yet. And where we are right now reminds me so much of 2012, 2013 in the first Panda and Penguin updates, in that there was this period between updates. Sometimes that was 12 months. And whilst I don't for a minute believe the helpful content system is set up in the same way, I think the impact we're seeing is very similar. The way nobody expected it to happen. Nobody expected for sites to tank overnight, like we saw in 2012, like we saw last year. When we break it down to how the algorithms work and how they're training content, there's a gap. And we are in that gap where the SERPs aren't as good as they should be because we have to wait for that content to train the models. And I believe that is why we're not seeing the impact that a lot of these things should be. But these are the things that are having big impact on sort of your traditional brick and mortar businesses, and I think certainly, for myself coming at this, not just from a content side perspective, but from an agency perspective, working with e-commerce brands, working with brick and mortar businesses, we can see these things having a real impact there. These are sites that were not suppressed in the helpful content update, which leads me to sort of draw the conclusion that these are the things we should be doing. Yes, it's frustrating as hell. But when we sort of draw this out to how are these systems being trained, we now know, matter of fact, it came from a Google engineer, that the systems are being trained on quality rated data. That quality rated data 12 months ago will have directly or indirectly rated sites or sites like many content sites which aren't recovering as probably not very low EEAT, but probably lower EEAT. they most likely still have that classifier placed on them, which is why, I think the real interesting one will be what happens when we see this refresh. I've said about EEAT for 6-12 months now. Make it your goal to be your niche, your industry, and certainly in like-by-like sites, make it your goal to set the gold standard in your niche, your sub-niche of what EEAT looks like. And I believe that over the next 6 to 12 months, they are going to be the sites that win big. It's frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating. Many, many sites have had their revenues taken away overnight. Just as many haven't, Interestingly, I run a lot of tests, and actually, a couple of sites that, that were pure AI test sites that I have, I launched them probably June, July last year, a couple of months before the helpful content update. They are flying more than ever. It shouldn't work, no links built to them. It shouldn't work, but they've not been suppressed by the helpful content system. They were too new at the time where that came around. I fully expect those two sites that I'm talking about to be absolutely decimated when it refreshes. Google hasn't got it right. And I think, there are certain, makes it even worse when one of these sites is in the medical sector. It's not pure spam. It's pure AI, that the content is okay. It's a sub niche, but it's ranking position 1, position 2 for some, pretty decent terms. As an SEO, I can stand there and say it should not be ranking. Certainly not after the helpful content update. But running these sort of tests gives us a bit more of an insight into, okay, well, why are the things that should be aligning with what ranks, not having the impact? And I think the conclusion we have to draw is that we haven't seen this full refresh. Google is in a period of retraining data. And that's my gut feeling here. It's frustrating, but I think when we break it down into how the algorithms, well, as much as we can, how the algorithms work, it starts to answer the question a bit more. And again, step back 10, 11 years. If you were hit by Penguin, even though it was in theory algorithmic, you were not seeing that recovery despite removing links, despite submitting a disavow file. You usually weren't seeing that recovery until the next algorithm refresh. And I think, in that sense, a lot aligns with that.
With the goal of making it so expert content ranks, my worry is, and thing is, I am a big fan. If it was just like create an amazing brand and stuff like this, I'm so on board with that. I want to do it the right way.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I've never been more motivated to do like the bad shit.
Yeah.
Which is
I know.
it's never been more profitable, right? Like I make $1,000 a month off Reddit, and I make thousands and thousands of dollars off a subfolder I have on one of the biggest finance sites in the world that no one knows about. And it's never been more profitable to do that. And so if you've been a big company that so number one, unfortunately, the thing that everyone's realized now is that if you are a brand that's won in this, you can do as much AI content that is mass spammed as you want and rank for any affiliate keyword, which to me doesn't promote good quality content. So there's the unfortunate,
it doesn't,
and I'll take advantage of that, but I'd rather build brands, to be honest. And so at the same time, go on.
No, I was going to say my stance on that is it comes back to where I started as, are you black hat, white hat, do what works hat? It's, as well as I do, Jamie, that some of those things won't last forever.
Yeah.
And I think, there are some of us who will rinse those things whilst they work. But on the other hand, I think it's balancing it and hedging with, okay, long term, I've got to build a brand.
Yeah.
And I think, that's that $1 million question. And I think, what's right for one person isn't right for another. If I go and build 10 sites and, all 10 of them get absolutely smashed by the next helpful content update, but I've made 250 grand in the process, great. I'll go and do it again. I'll go and find the next loophole. But if you're building something that is employing people, is providing part of a, that delivery process where, you're buying from suppliers, part of that ecosystem, then it is risky as hell. If it's someone taking investment, it's about risk and reward, and I think there's no right or wrong answer. Are there people doing very well from exploiting what, I believe are loopholes right now? Yes, there are. Are they doing anything wrong? In my opinion, no. Are they so naive that they believe they won't get hit at some point in the future? Sadly, I think some of them are. And, I think that's what we saw. That was the uproar we saw last year. Some of us know that what we're doing or what we did, certainly on personal projects or projects that aren't directly responsible for employing people, other people's livelihoods, we know damn well that it ain't going to last forever. We know that we're exploiting a loophole. And I've got no issues with that. I've got no issues at all. But I think that difficult thing comes to, what are you building? Are you building something long term? Or are you just trying to earn a quick buck and then move on to the next thing? And I think that is probably the biggest difference to that question on why should I focus on the brand-led side versus the quick wins. The quick wins won't be here forever. Yes, there will be other quick wins, but I think it comes back to that whole thing, why I call these things like the real business update. Are you building a real business or are you just earning cash? And I think, there are a lot of people out there right now who will have bought sites for a hell of a lot of money in August last year, and they will have been crushed in September.
I've seen a few that got out like a week before it tanked.
Yeah, I know. There's some of these stories in it. It's mad.
They are high risk in, doing the things we know we shouldn't do but work. They are high risk investments. If you know what you're doing, you can quickly ride that wave and make it pay back. The problem is you get everybody else who follows, who sees a site doing well, and they go, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to use ChatGPT to create content. So-and-so said it's okay because it worked for them. And then they suddenly quit their job and, they're earning 10 grand a month. Tomorrow they're earning $100 a month.
Yeah.
You have to, ranking a website should never have been easy. It should have never been so easy. And I think, the influencers, as I'm going to call them, have a certain duty to, it's high risk investment. Certainly buying a site, building one from scratch is, that sort of sweat equity. But buying a site, and honestly, could we have called it 12 months ago? Could the three of us sat here 12 months ago? Could we have said some of these sites ain't going to last forever? Of course we could have.
Yeah.
And, I think don't get me wrong. There are things that I would do on my own sites that I would never, ever, ever do on a client site that is a multi-million-dollar business that's employing 200-300 people. But I think where expertise comes into it is what to use when. And I think that's, that's why experience in marketing, that's why it frustrates the shit out of me when people take to Twitter and go, oh yeah, go and, what did they call it? The keyword swapping technique, or go and create a piece of content, go and swap the name out. We were doing that 15 years ago and it got hit in the Panda update. Now, go and do it, but you will get hit after, you might be lucky for 12 months. You might get hit after 3 months. No one can say, but this shit stopped working at least 10 years ago. You can do anything for a finite period of time. Go and buy shit links. It will help you to rank until Google catches up with you. I have no issues with doing that. Where I sort of personally draw the line is when you're then encouraging other people to do that who don't know the risks. And that to me is, I think, where, we come back to this brand-led versus risk-led If you know what you're doing, you can make a lot of money very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But you also know that probably won't be around in 6 months, in 12 months. But you've got the experience to know what, how to find what that next thing is that you can exploit, that you can leverage.
Yeah.
The unfortunate people in this are the ones who go, oh, I've read that you can earn 10, 20 grand a month by starting a blog that's done, written by ChatGPT. They are the ones that I feel sorry for in this, because they don't have the experience to know not to do it.
And they're wondering why they don't rank when they don't build any digital PR links or anything like that.
I agree with that 100%. I guess if we're going to go on the spectrum of like content and like experience versus like SEO link based whatever stuff, I'm a content purist. I want to see the best content from whoever, like whether it's a hobbyist or a hobbyist expert versus a huge brand, be able to fight it out on meritocracy. So it frustrates
100%.
me now to see that it's pretty far away from that. Is I guess where this comes from when with the EAT side and everything else. But last thing, I know you've got to be places. So if we're looking at affiliate sites, well, actually not even affiliate sites. Let's go informational sites that want to show that they are a brand. They believe that they've got the content, and now they want to show the brand signals for that. If you were ideating digital PR campaigns for, let's say, even say Sammy's site, it's even though Sammy's already crushed it, to be fair, he's not been hit like a lot of sites. If you're looking for, because obviously you want to, like, generally you want to be everywhere, you want to be the brand, whatever. But if you're trying to create a laser targeted, excellent PR campaign that gets people talking about you, that has that viral potential, everything else, what kind of things have you trained your eye to just think that will work, that won't work? What kind of like mini frameworks can people at home that might not have the budget for PR but still want to give it a go? What can they do?
So number one is questions that people are asking. If you are identifying through keyword research, through social, Sammy, if you're creating sort of question, content that is loosely based around answering questions people have on the SERPs, that is PRable. If there are expert insights in there that are ideally not just regurgitated from what's at the top of the SERPs, that for most brands who are certainly on a budget, who are trying to do it themselves, the informational content they're creating should be the starting point. If there is search volume behind a question, people are looking for it. What that typically means is when there are people looking for something, a publication will want to create that content. Proactively pitch out your expert insights from that content. You earn the link back to that content, which in turn helps it rank higher. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. Integrating digital PR into your content strategy is probably the most effective thing anybody can do right now. Stepping outside of that, data studies are still so incredibly effective when they give an entertaining story. So if, you see the sort of things that work really well, the price of houses is predicted to be X, Y, or Z by 2034, there's a real story there. You go, okay, based on historical data, we're going to extrapolate that out 10 years. And we're going to go, okay, how affordable will it be to buy a house based on current trends in 10 years' time? That is a real story that people want to consume, and I think that data-led, the simple one is, I call it the pub test. Carrie Rose at Rise at 7 calls it the mum test. Go and ask your mate in the pub. Go and say, I've just seen this, which is, your campaign idea. If they show any level of interest, you've probably got a good story. If they could not care less, don't bother. There's got to be some element of surprise. If you are just pitching out data-led stories around the expected, then a journalist ain't going to want to cover that. Journalists want clicks. Journalists are KPI'd on clicks. And I think, when you then go into that is, you've got to think, does anybody care about this? And I think, a great one is, if I saw this on social media, would I stop scrolling? If you would, that's probably the best validation. So, data studies with a story that is and long gone, what I will say, long gone are the days where you need fancy interactive assets. You can tell these stories as a pretty simple piece of blog content if they're backed by data, trustworthy data. So in the finance space, you've got World Bank, you've got ONS, you've got all these sort of data sets. Find some interesting stories, but make sure they are interesting. Don't fall down that trap of going, oh, I'm going to pitch this out, but actually, who cares? Because if you don't care, as a searcher, as a user, a journalist sure as hell won't.
And how do you optimize that in the pitch? Like, how you word the outreach to like hook people? I guess, like to make
you've
sure
got to sell. You've got to sell headlines. I think if you can imagine what a headline would be on a newspaper, you work backwards from
journalist. Yeah.
You tell the journalist, you plant that seed, you help them to see what that article could be. And, when you're doing outreach, your most important thing is the headline you use.
Nice.
If you don't create an engaging headline, your outreach email will never get opened. If your email doesn't get opened, it doesn't matter how good your pitch is, how good the content you're showcasing is, your headline is the most important thing. Think in headlines, not, brand X does Y, nobody gives a shit. Surprising stat as a headline. I look back to one of the first campaigns we ever did that went big. We were working with a fast fashion brand, and we did a really simple calculator called You vs. the Kardashians. And it was essentially a really simple salary calculator where you entered your salary, and as soon as you hit calculate, it showed you in that time you were on the page how much each of the Kardashians had earned in that period. But it would also tell you how long it would take the Kardashians to earn your salary. This was at the height of Kardashian fame. And we had our biggest headline there was Kim Kardashian earns the average UK salary in 1 hour, 10 minutes. That is a headline. That is a headline that, love the Kardashians, hate the Kardashians. You go, oh my God, either good on them or why the hell are they earning that?
Yeah.
They are headlines. That was 5 pieces of data. That was the annual salary taken from Forbes Rich List of 5 of the Kardashians turned into a really simple tool. You don't have to go data heavy. Yes, that was 2017. Things were different. You could get away with, a lot of stories hadn't been told back then. But I think, it's a great example that I continue to use of how do what's the difference between a headline and a statement? Had we pitched out fast fashion brand launches Kardashian salary calculator, no one would have given a damn. No one would have opened it. When we pitch out Kim Kardashian earns the average UK salary in 1 hour, that gets heads turning. That makes people go, right, okay, this is an interesting story. Journalists
the best ones I've seen
stories.
Sorry, I was just going to say, the best ones I've seen from that, sorry to interrupt you, James, is
it's
the ones where it's where it angers one side. So the Kim Kardashian things, as you said there, some people say good on you, the others say what the hell, and then they argue with each other.
Absolutely.
And so it's we argue with us.
Yeah.
So you're capturing both sides of the coin. So any of my content that's ever gone viral has created debate. And then that's 100%. When the ones that will actually nail it. So you've got the headline, and then in the comments of those articles, it would just be war, basically.
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head there. And I think that is, that is a story that divides people. You've then got we flipped that into all sorts. You're talking 2017. We're talking, Google was a very, very different beast back then. But we wanted links at all costs. And I think we spun that out to Kim Kardashian earns the average teacher's salary in so long, earns the average retail worker. We spun it everywhere because we just took these average salaries and put them through. We rinsed it, but we earned something like 1,700 pieces of coverage in a week. We made national news. We made front page of Mashable. We had, we hit national news in the US. It was big. Would I do that now? No, because actually at least half, if not 3/4 of the links we earned weren't really relevant. But it worked back then. This is 2017. This is long before relevance was sort of that real measure. And I think, that went viral. Jamie, you mentioned, what will my tips be for going viral? My tip there would be, do not set your sights on going viral, because when you do, everybody ends up disappointed. I've probably been involved in 10 to 20 campaigns over the last 5 years that have truly gone viral. And actually, everyone is disappointed every single time. You see a bit of a spike, you see some links, but the long-term impact isn't anywhere near as good as consistently earning relevant links month in, month out. So I think, going viral, certainly when we're talking links, when we're talking SEO impact, it's overrated, and I think too many people now look back on, what I call the good old days when that sort of shit worked. You want relevant links consistently that position you or your brand as an expert, as a thought leader, as a voice of authority. They are what deliver the impact.
I'd rather one money week link, for example, than
Exactly.
like 20 like mashable like roundups, essentially, for example. Yeah. So yeah, 100%.
And it comes back to, is this content positioning you as an expert in what you do? If they are, if that content is saying Sammy is an expert in kickstarting your digital creator career, that is so much better than something that, isn't really relevant. And, it's a balance, and I think, one of the things that I have always said is, when you are a brand new site, you are playing catch up. So the tactics you would use, if you're launching a brand new site today, you can afford to step away from sort of hyper relevancy a little bit. You have to catch up. You do not have any authority when you start a site. But once you get to a sort of a somewhat of a level playing field, you are in a position where you sort of can and should be focusing on that, that relevancy, that brand building. And I think, it's strategy. Strategy is not doing the same thing throughout the whole life cycle of a site. It's knowing when to pivot and when to use what tactic.
I've absolutely loved this. This has been amazing.
Nice.
I really want you to talk about I know you've got a big event coming up as well, so I wanted to give you the platform to obviously talk about that. And
thank you.
Let everyone know.
Yeah, April the 11th, Stoller Hall in Manchester, we're running the first in-person digital PR summit. So that will be 400 digital PRs in a room, 2 stages. We launched this virtually in COVID. I was, sort of 3 months into lockdown. I was sick to shit of the same people being on every virtual event week in, week out. Don't get me wrong, they were very, very good people, but there's only so many times the same people can say the same things. And back then, there was virtual events every single day. So myself and one of our team at the time, we said, well, rather than complain about it, let's do something about it. So we rounded up, I think we rounded up 6 speakers who had never spoken at an event before, but we knew were great voices in digital PR. I managed to persuade John Mueller to come and do a Q&A with me about digital PR-led link building, back when everyone was at home and bored shitless. And I think we had something like 800 people sign up at 2 weeks' notice. We did that again. We did that another twice virtually. And I think the last one we did, we had about 2,500 people sign up. Our vision was always to take that in person. There are brilliant conferences such as Brighton SEO, but they are not solely focused on digital PR. And I think, we wanted a platform. We've gone out and created the conference we want to attend. And, in doing so, nice. We brought together a lineup of speakers that we believe is brilliant, will bring some brilliant value, sharing some insights that aren't shared online every single day. The 11th of April, Stoller Hall, Manchester, the Digital PR Summit. It will be a very, very good day. We are getting down to sort of that final batch of tickets now. But yeah, it's going to be a really, really good day, really exciting, all about informational content, not sales based. And yeah, we set out to create the event we want to attend. So hopefully other people want to attend it too, which so far it's seeming likely that they do.
I'll leave a link to that in the show notes below if anyone wants to pick that up. But James, if someone's interested in digital PR campaigns, SEO content, where's the best places to find you?
Yeah, you head over to digitaloff.co.uk. You can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. Just search for James Brockbank. I will come up. Yeah, drop me a line. I'd be more than happy to chat and follow our content. We put out quite a lot of content around EEAT, around digital PR, sort of through the agency blog. So yeah, always got something to say. Always try and say things that not everybody else is saying. Again, practicing what I preach. The number one rule of driving success right now is doing and saying things that other people aren't. So yeah, go check that out, and yeah, feel free to connect.
Nice. Thank you for coming on, James.
Thank you
I
for having
agree.
me.
I read up some before this, some of the content on the digital blog around EAT. There's some of the much better content out there than a lot what other people are putting out, and I do recommend reading
Thank
the
you.
stuff there. It is actually good.
Thank you.
And your tweets on EAT are actually good. Like a lot of people just want to talk about it as like
Yeah,
a
man.
hypothetical rather than like being actionable. So I know it sounded like I was questioning some things, but I think that's important to like actually get
Oh,
to
it
like
is.
the root of what's like stuff. And so
Of course it is.
if anyone listened to this got the wrong impression, like it, like I think I'm a big fan of what James is doing around the EAT, and I recommend everyone check out that blog. So yeah, cheers everyone.
Thank you.